Moon Knight Season 1 has concluded, and what can you say other than A, spoilers inbound for all 6 episodes, and B, holy butts, look at that giant crocodile kaiju fighting that bird skull your weird uncle bought you for your birthday. Here's 25 things you missed in Moon Knight. Maybe. I don't know you. You might know all of this. And by Khonshu, I know you'll inform me in the comments if you do, so let's go. Okay, so this one's really just for those who didn't stay for the post-credits scene where comic fans get quite the reveal, and so does poor, ill-fated Arthur Harrow. In this scene, we find Harrow in the mental hospital, seemingly whiling away his time until Kevin Feige reaches a deal to bring back Ethan Hawke for round 2, only for a man speaking Spanish to take him in his wheelchair out of the hospital with at least one seemingly innocent orderly left deceased at the scene. This guy takes him out to a limo where Harrow is confronted by Khonshu, who explains that Marc Spector has, gasp, another alter in the form of, drumroll please, Jake Lockley. Mr. Lockley pulls out a gun and kablamo! No season 2 for Mr. Hawk. Jake then drives off, and we see that the limo even has custom plates, suggesting something more ritzy for Mr. Spector. For those who haven't read the comics, Jake is one of Mark's original 3 alters. There he's a cab driver who serves as a sort of everyman in the streets to pick up intel. He's not a baddie, but it would seem that the show wants to introduce a little more drama by making him the bloodthirsty alter willing to do whatever Khonshu wants. And if you are a comic book reader, this came as no surprise since Khonshu is, well, a massive dick. Dude's always trying to screw over poor Marc Spector, and that's cause for a lot of great stories in his more recent comic book runs. Also, this suit is a pretty iconic one for fans of the comic, so it's nice to see that here as well. Really, this whole in-credits scene, in addition to getting rid of our big bad crocodile god, really just helps to prod the old fangasm button for anyone still unconvinced by the show. Oh, and of course Jake Lockley was referenced multiple times throughout the show, just not by name. He was responsible for unaliving these dudes in episode 3, and since Mark finds Steven in a sarcophagus, it stands to reason that this other sarcophagus contains, or is at the very least, a mental link to Jake. That limo might also be a reference to Stephen Grant's comic book version, wherein he is basically Bruce Wayne, but is more directly a reference to this limo in which Mr. Knight rides around in the Warren Ellis run, which is itself a very big influence on this series. A lot of folks have gotten pretty excited about Layla's transformation into Tawaret's avatar. As they should, she looks freaking rad. Dang, that is cool. Okay, one more time. One more. Yeah, one more. Yeah, okay, that's enough. One more. Part of the excitement lies in her seemingly being both the first Egyptian superhero and the first hero created specifically for the MCU. This isn't the case, however, as nifty as that idea might be. While the characters share very little in common, Layla's avatar identity is meant to be Scarlet Scarab, a deep-cut character whose real name is Abdul Faul. Layla's surname is El Faouli, which I'm probably messing up the pronunciation, but that's just gonna happen in this video, giving us a pretty decent foreshadowing for this big moment. There's also several other references throughout the series, such as this red scarab mark when she's in the sort of hospital, and the fact that her father calls her his little scarab. As far as Tawaret's involvement, she's never actually been a part of the Marvel Comics as far as I know, so hey, first anthropomorphic hippo lady in the MCU. Boom. Back to the post-credit scene for a second. If you look real close, you'll see that it's Sienkiewicz Hospital. Man, I love these names that I've only ever read. They're so great. Named after comic book artist Bill Sienkiewicz, who was responsible for drawing the original Moon Knight series. Another hospital Easter egg comes in the form of
Putnam Medical Facility in Chicago, Illinois,
that Mark sees as a way for his mind to cope with the concept of the duat. This is a direct reference to the facility Mark is placed in Moon Knight number 11 from 2016, wherein Mark's origin is retold. More specifically, Putnam is where he's staying when his father dies, and we see this sign as he's on the way to his father's funeral. Of course, in the series, it's his mother's funeral and his dad lives. So maybe we'll see some some dad action. It's a weird way to put it. Going way back to episode 1, remember this exchange?
And did it suck for you? Getting rejected from the field of reeds?
Well, that don't make sense, because I'm not dead, am I?
Well, that right there is some tasty sweet foreshadowing for episode 5, in which Steven saves Mark, and Steven then becomes stuck frozen in the sands of the afterlife, while Mark, shock and awe, winds up in the field of reeds. Imagine explaining this to someone who hasn't watched the series.
That's the definition of a red flag, isn't it?
Goldfish play a pretty key role in foreshadowing as well, and seemingly in more ways than one. By the end of the show, we see 2 goldfish in the tank, a pretty clear reference to Mark and Steven coexisting. But beyond that, the show of course found other darker uses for the goldfish, and it's revealed that the goldfish, or at least the need to own one, is a product of Mark's memory of his deceased brother Randall, who drew a goldfish with one deformed fin like some kind of little weirdo. By the way, pretty messed up to remember your drowned sibling with a fish, just saying. I got so distracted by all the foreshadowing, I totally forgot to write in the script the most obvious reason for the goldfish. It's memory. Goldfish memory spans are often cited incorrectly as being around 3 seconds. Seeing as how Steven has huge lapses in his memory, this metaphor kind of speaks for itself. Oh, and speaking of goldfish, Gus's tank features a whole bunch of foreshadowing by itself. Take a drink every time I say the word foreshadowing, you'll find yourself on a boat with a hippo goddess in no time. In the tank you've got the boat, the Pyramid of Giza, the Gates of Osiris, and this head, which I guess could be a reference to this gross scene. One reference for the comic fans that any casual viewers almost certainly didn't get was this brief shot of the name Duchamp in Mark's recent incoming call history. In the comics, Frenchie Duchamp, or Duchamp? Duchamp. I'm realizing I don't know how to say a lot of words that I've read for a long time. Anyway, Frenchie Duchamp is Mark's best friend and pilot, whom he worked with as a mercenary before his life of Khonshu-based servitude. He's been with him ever since that first comic in Werewolf by Night. Unfortunately, we never meet Duchamp in this season, but hopefully we get him in season 2. And hopefully he has them sick robot legs. It's a whole thing. Steven's somewhat rude boss at the museum gift shop, Donna, appears to be a very slight reference to Donna Kraft, who served as his publicist when he owned Spector Corp in the comics. Another heavily fan-speculated inclusion that doesn't really amount to much other than a cool Easter egg is this gold dude, this street performer guy, who also appears in the mental hospital, which... Oh, because it's literally Mark's mind grappling with the afterlife and his identity, so it's an actual mental hospital. I got there. Anyway, lots of fans speculated based on his appearance that this was Crawley, who in the comics is a good friend of Jake's. In the credits, we even get confirmation of the character's name, but other than a striking physical resemblance, there's not much to connect the two at this point. Another character from the comics who is brought up but never utilized is Bushman, who is name dropped in episode 5.
Didn't have a ton of options after that, so I went work for hire for my old CO, Bushman.
In the comics, Raoul Bushman is a cruel and sadistic mercenary who employs Mark and Frenchie, who in turn decide they need to, get out of Dodge, because that dude is freaking nuts. Bushman has a lot of influence on Mark's backstory in the comics. At one point, they're all partially responsible for Randall Spector's journey into villainy, and more importantly, Bushman is the one who unalives Marlene's father, which, for those who only know the show, long story short, Layla is the show's version of Marlene. She then saves Mark after he's left for dead by Bushman, leading to Mark becoming Moon Knight after he's dragged into the Temple of Khonshu. Apparently, he was intended to show up in Season 1, but Moon Knight head writer Jeremy Slater has stated that Bushman felt too close to Black Panther's Eric Killmonger, which, I don't know, like, I don't want to be that guy, but on a character level, there's really not that much they have in common outside of the military background and an interest in antiques. And, yeah. Moving on. Speaking of Black Panther, the ancestral plane used in that film is name dropped by Tawaret, who explains that the afterlife is real, but just seen differently by various cultures. This begs the question, what do other afterlives look like? Does this, along with the multiverse, give us endless possibilities for the return of dead characters? Time will tell. Say, are you one of those so-and-sos who keeps their phone out while watching movies and TV? Well, for once you're in the right, because throughout Moon Knight there is a sort of hidden QR code in each episode that, when scanned, links to free Moon Knight comics, which are updated weekly. Basically, this means that you will get the same comic no matter which code you scan. For example, I scanned episode 1 and episode 5's QR codes, and both got me Moon Knight Acts of Evil, featuring everyone's favorite blue time traveler, King the Conqueror. By the way, if you weren't totally convinced from the moment he started putting freaking broken glass in his shoes and acting all villainy right out the gate, Arthur Harrow definitely should have rung some bad guy bells by the time he started using his Egyptian god-granted powers. See all that purple energy there? Where have we seen that before? Oh right, Agatha Harkness.
Same story, different century.
Who of course was utilizing magical energies from the Darkhold, as well as from all them other witches she absorbed or whatever. And where does that thing get its energy from? Well, it's the Dark Dimension, or basically, well, it's hell. One reference I'm not sure was intentional, but yeah, whatever, is the psychiatric facility on a boat, which could be pulling from Marc's brief stay in a similar, although far more prison-like facility that was on board an airplane in Moon Knight number 11 from 2015. That was the Brian Wood and Greg Smallwood run, as opposed to the 2016 run by Jeff Lemire and Greg Smallwood. Y'all, Moon Knight comics are, they're confusing. Marc's childhood bedroom scene in episode 5 is in and of itself a whole dang nest of Easter eggs. We get this Spaceman Toy that could be referencing an unnamed astronaut altar that very, very briefly appears in that much lauded Lemire run that informed so much of this series. One could surmise it's a childhood fantasy of Marc's brought out through his DID. Heck, he even did my light just go? God dang it. Everything is awful. Everything sucks when you've got a home office. Gosh darn it. Anyway, one could surmise it's a childhood fantasy of Marc's brought out through his DID. Heck, he even gets a rad crescent-shaped spaceship, exactly as a child might imagine a space-faring Moon Knight. There's also these scales, of course referring to... Why are all my lights going out? There's also these scales, of course referring to those used throughout the series, including on Harrow and his fellow Amit cultists' wrists, as well as the actual scales used to judge Marc and Steven in the afterlife. Then there's the Tombbuster poster, which aside from extrapolating on the Tombbuster footage we see as part of the mental hospital sequence, also includes some recognizable names. Well, there's this one name that's a composite of two recognizable names. Doug Moench and Moench? This is a disaster. And Don Perlin were the original creators of Moon Knight back in 1975, and the star of Tombbuster is referred to as Doug Perlin. Tombbuster is a Timely Atlas studio production. Marvel Comics was founded in 1939 as Timely Comics, and eventually became Atlas Comics before being rebranded as Marvel Comics in 1961. And as long as we're talking Tombbuster, this old school movie beloved by young Marc might be a reference to the 2011 Moon Knight comic book run by Brian Michael Bendis and Alex Maleev, in which Marc funds a TV show called The Legend of Khonshu based on his adventures. Also during Marc's stay in the mental hospital, we get a shot of this Moon Knight figure, which is an actual toy sold as part of the Marvel Legends line in 2020 as a Walgreens exclusive. Waterson Food and Liquor, seen in episode 5 behind sad boy Marc Spector during his mother Shiva, appears to be referencing Trevor Waterson, the co-executive producer on all of the MCU shows on Disney+. In episode 1, we begin with Harrow filling his shoes with glass as a means of penance due to his impure, violent mind as a former servant of Khonshu, now serving Amit. Something we, of course, don't know in that moment. As this happens, Bob Dylan's Every Grain of Sand plays as our fun little soundtrack during this rather dark opening. Later in episode 2, the song plays diegetically in the background as Harrow is showing off his swanky cult headquarters. Considering the song is all about devotion to a god, in real life referring to Bob Dylan's born-again Christianity, it fits nicely in describing Harrow's and even Marc's motivations. And since I'm talking episode 2, let's end with the beginning, when Steven is being shown evidence by these phony cops about Marc's nefarious past. The file number is 1975, the year of Moon Knight's first appearance. And yeah, that's all my time for today. With this supposedly limited series very obviously leading into more seasons, I'm personally super excited to see where Moon Knight goes next. Hopefully he rips off someone's face.
Hoy te toca perder.